to discuss trends in the Premier League. What's happening with attacking players, specifically the number 10 role, which is supposed to be the creator-in-chief. In the Premier League, we don't really see out-and-out creative players anymore, at least that's my viewpoint, and we're going to discuss that a little bit today. We see the false nine, we see 9.5s, we see the rise of wingers really being the central attacking figures. But this trend is something that I think we've been seeing for years, and I'm not sure if it's good for the league, if it's not good for the league, but what are your thoughts on that?
We've seen the emergence of holding midfielders, pivots. That's really become a very central position in football at an elite level. And I think the emergence of the central defensive midfielder is a reaction to that offensive midfield position. That used to be the focal point of offensive football. We think back to the days of players like Ronaldinho, players like Zidane, players who created everything from that position for their teams. And we saw teams having to counter that by leaving a defensive midfielder in that position to shield the back line. And that has affected how teams attack. We know that teams, they try to keep it really compact nowadays. So attacking players usually forced out wide, and that's why we see the winger as the focal point for offense nowadays. I still think there are quite a few attacking midfielders. The position has changed in nature. This is generally true for all positions in the modern game. We see players having to take up a hybrid role. But I still think that you have a lot of attacking players. And if you go through some of them right now, and we're going to get into that discussion, we'll start at the top. Liverpool, we saw Dominik Szoboszlai come into the league as a number 10 and as used by Jurgen Klopp and now Arne Slot. More of a central midfielder, not so involved in attacking play. In the latter stages of the season, we've seen him emerge as a goal-scoring threat. Not necessarily a creative player, and I think that goes to your point that the offense doesn't run through him, but I think that's in part due to the fact that they have Mo Salah, and I think everything goes through Mo Salah. If we see Mo Salah move on from Liverpool, I think we'll start to see Dominik Szoboszlai have to step up and take more responsibility.
Yeah, I mean, with Szoboszlai, he's really getting on the end of plays. Like you said, Mo Salah is the focal point of the long ball that will come from, let's say, a Trent Alexander-Arnold or even Luis Diaz on the other side. And once they're able to penetrate the defense, they take a player on one-on-one, cut it back, and Szoboszlai is waiting there for the one-touch finish. I think it's simplified the position within Liverpool. The central attacking midfielder role is not someone who needs to create, not someone who needs to hold the ball, take players on, make passes in between the lines. He doesn't need to do any of that. He essentially needs to understand where the ball is going to end up and try to be in that place. When you think of who comes off the bench for Szoboszlai or who rotates with him, Curtis Jones, he pretty much plays the same role. So we don't see that flair, sort of the beautiful game, the Jogo Bonito that we came to love and enjoy from a Ronaldinho or a Rivaldo. It's not in the game anymore.
The contrary point that I would raise is that if you look at the next three teams in the league, you will see that position is still alive. If we take Arsenal, they have Odegaard, who is essentially classic number 10. He holds the ball. He's looking to create very good dribbling, good passing, can finish, and everything literally runs through him for their offense. So I think he's a good example of modern number 10. He's the one that's linking up with the winger, playing the 1-2s, playing that decisive pass to the striker.
Well, if you think about the position that he plays in, though, with the way that Arsenal play, they play with a 4-3-3. They play with a left 8 and a right 8, and Odegaard is more the right channel of the field, right? And we talked about his combination with Bukayo Saka. We know Saka's injured right now, but usually he's more on the right side of the field, not in the middle of the pitch. Depending on the opponent, he might be a little bit more free and move over to the left as opposed to just staying on the right. But, if he's playing against the top side and they're keeping their structure, because he needs to be in a certain position to defend as well. And that's one of the things that I would say is the hybrid nature of the role is is the defensive responsibility, right? So Odegaard, he's the player who starts the press for Arsenal, and he usually starts it from that right channel of the pitch. So whether he's attacking or whether he's defending, and when we think about a number 10, a pure number 10 really should have limited defensive responsibilities, right? And Odegaard has quite a large responsibility with the team because he's the one who has to marshal the team in a certain way and decide when that press is going to start. So
I think in the game we see, positions shift and change, and I think when Arsenal are in a defensive shape, he's actually much more central. And you see the other midfielders, whether it's Declan Rice or Partey, dropping back and playing in a deeper pivot position. It just so happens that in possession, he naturally drifts to the right, in part because he has that chemistry with Saka. But I think he has the freedom to go wherever he wants. It's not like he's restricted to being on the right. It's just his natural tendency is to play on the right side.
he has a freedom. And yes, I would say his natural inclination is to play like a 10. Of the players who are in the Premier League, whose game is just naturally fit to play as a 10. I agree. Odegaard is one of those players, but I don't know if he's actually successful in playing as a 10. We don't see Odegaard racking up tons of assists. We don't see him
This season,
racking up.
This season has been a bit of an anomaly for him and for Arsenal in general. I think we saw him the last 2 seasons racking up pretty impressive stats, both goal scoring and assists. So this season, in part because of his injury and injuries to other members of the team, we've seen his numbers decline.
And maybe that's part of the data, right? Odegaard was doing this before, but now he's doing something different that's not quite equating to what a number you would expect from a 10. So I agree. He's had an injury. Bukayo Saka's been injured. Arsenal are struggling for offensive chemistry, offensive numbers, if you will. But if we look at the stats, he's just not performing as a 10 would from a results perspective.
Well, I mean, the 10 isn't necessarily about results. It's more about the position and the impact that you have on the team in terms of its structure. You have effective 10s and you have ineffective 10s. Odegaard, he has been playing as a 10 the last seasons. This season, he has not been effective, but he was effective the last 2 seasons. And I think a trend shouldn't just take into account 1 season. So, I view him as a classic number 10, although his effectiveness has fluctuated a little bit this season. I think he's a clear example of a player who is in the mold of that classic creator attacking midfielder. If we shift now to Forest, we have a very modern interpretation of that role in Morgan Gibbs-White. His charge is really to do everything. The attack for Forest is pretty much all in transition, so they're not really concerned with possession that much.
Right.
He's not trying to play 1-2s and play that decisive pass. He's basically trying to win the ball, get it wide as quickly as possible, and join in an attack, get into the box for that cutback. He's really the engine for the team.
Yeah, I think Morgan Gibbs-White is a good example. And I'm not sure if this is what you meant by hybrid, but the way that I'm interpreting it is offensive and defensive responsibilities. He's a player who has quite a bit of defensive responsibility, and by carrying out those defensive responsibilities, it enables him to have an impact on the offense. He's pressing, he's making it difficult for the opposing team. They end up turning the ball over, makes up the ball very quickly, sprays it wide to Elanga or Hudson-Odoi, and then they're off. So I think the way the position is evolving, these players who play as a 10 or quasi 10, they need to still have those creative characteristics where they can play a 60-yard ball, where they can play it in between the lines. But they also have to have that engine. They also have to have that physicality to be able to defend and pick the ball off of players. So we're seeing an evolution of a maybe more complete player, right, playing in the 10 role, and not just being able to create as a one-dimensional player. And I think the result of that, though, is what you see with a Morgan Gibbs-White. He's good at creating, like he's skillful, but he's not lights out good, right? He's not making you stand up in your seat. You're not saying, oh, did you see that? What Morgan Gibbs-White did? You know, we don't really say that ever. And it's very rare that we say that about a number 10. Even Odegaard, we don't say,
Well,
oh man.
that I think that I will offer up the next number 10 in the list, actually, and that's Cole Palmer, because I think he is that guy that you're like, oh wow, he's pure magic on the pitch when he's on form. Obviously, he's been struggling a little bit of late, but when he's at his best, I mean, it's nothing but pure class. He's a perfect example of a player who actually doesn't have that much defensive responsibilities. Is there just to create, and he does it all. You know, he scores goals, scores fantastic goals, you know, provides fantastic assists when his teammates do convert. But he's that one player that I think does the unexpected and the brilliant. Yeah, I would offer up Cole Palmer as evidence to the contrary.
I agree. He's the exception to the rule. He doesn't have the defensive responsibility, and he is able to shock and awe when you see some of the things he can accomplish on the pitch. With that being said, it seems like once a player, and maybe I'm jumping to a conclusion, but we said Cole Palmer's out of form. He's not really having the impact that he was having before. Is that because he's out of form, or is it because teams are able to adjust now when they see a player like that and they're able to neutralize it? And even if a player doesn't have the defensive responsibility and they're able to just focus on creating, does the opposition now just say, okay, we're going to take one of our players, play him man to man, and mark him out of the game? Something has changed with Cole Palmer and the way teams are setting up to stop him, and whatever they're doing, it's been successful. This past weekend, Chelsea played Leicester. Cole Palmer was ill before the game, so he wasn't a top performer in the game, but he did have a moment to take Chelsea ahead with a penalty. Him being one of the best penalty takers in the league, ended up having it saved, and that's the first penalty he's actually has failed to convert in his short career. But I guess my question is, when we see a player like Cole Palmer who has the license to just create, our teams just now setting up and saying, okay, we see what's happening. We're going to take our number 6 and we're just going to put him on him the whole game. And then the whole idea of a creative player being able to express himself becomes a moot point because the other team is able to neutralize it so easily.
With Chelsea at the moment, I think we talked about this in the past. Pedro Neto now trying to step up and contribute more in the goal scoring department. But Cole Palmer was responsible for everything that Chelsea did offensively. Of course, you know, when teams realize that, then they set up to prevent him from having an impact on the game. And you would expect other players to contribute when he's not contributing. But if they're not doing that, then Chelsea's results obviously suffer, right? And that has been the case. Other players were not stepping up. If other players are producing goals, then a team cannot just man-mark Cole Palmer exclusively because they have to worry about other players. There has been an imbalance in the contributions, drastic imbalance. Once other players start to contribute, that effectively enables Cole Palmer to be himself once again. You cannot expect one player nowadays to do it all. And regardless of how talented you are as a number 10 or any offensive position, you can't be solely responsible, unless your name is Mo Salah, of course. You can't be responsible for your team's entire offensive production. He needs help. He's still a very young player developing at the early stage of his career. To have that much weight on his shoulders, it's almost suffocating him. He's not able to have a break. Every time he doesn't score, everyone is, oh, it's Cole Palmer. What happened to Cole Palmer? You know, he missed a penalty. You have the record. You know what I mean? For most consecutively converted penalties. But he misses one penalty and people are, oh, he missed the penalty. Yeah, the guy's human. He missed the penalty. So I think the pressure has been unfairly placed on his young shoulders.
Yeah, I agree. Maybe the high standard that he set is just too high of a bar to maintain all the time, right? The bar was so high that now maybe he's coming back down to earth and he'll be more like a normal player, even a normal top player where he has moments of top form and moments where he's not as good. But I guess who's next in the table? Is it Manchester City?
Yeah, the next. Well, I think this leads right into your point that you're trying to make. So I'll let you make it.
Well, part of my point is Kevin De Bruyne, right? Kevin De Bruyne, an all-time great, the Premier League, a true number 10 who can create, or who was able to create from any position, wide position, central position. We saw it with Guardiola's tinkering tactics. He was playing in the middle, playing on the right, playing on the left. Either way, he did the same thing, and that was creating. With Kevin De Bruyne's decline after his ruptured hamstring injury, we see him not able to return to form. He's no longer the same player. And when we look at the replacement, Phil Foden, now sometimes it's Omar Marmoush, we just see a different type of Manchester City, a team that is attacking from the flanks with Doku and Savinho. Foden, not quite a consistent player. You can call him a 10, but he's more of a 10 who's getting on the end of those reverse passes from a winger.
Yeah, he's more like a false nine, actually.
Yeah. I don't even know what to call him. Is he a false nine? Is he a 9.5? Because the thing about Foden, right, he can receive the ball in the middle of the pitch and he has that great spin turn. So when he's in form, you can pass him the ball in the middle of the pitch. He can sense where the defender is, spin around him, open it up, and fire a rocket into the upper 90. He can also ghost into positions when Doku or Savinho are able to break down the defense on the byline and have a reverse pass. He's a very multi-dimensional player. The one thing I wouldn't say about Foden is you don't see Foden beating a man and then making a beautiful pass that you didn't think was going to happen. And the reason that's an important point, if you listen to what Mo Salah is saying about his season this season, he's saying, this is my best season. And one of the reasons is because I'm making players on my team better. If you look at Dominik Szoboszlai, Luis Diaz, or Cody Gakpo, they're having better numbers than they've ever had. And that's because of me, because I'm creating opportunities for them. And we know Mo Salah is leading the league in assists. With Manchester City and the introduction of Omar Marmoush, you have to think it's a different direction that they're going in, because we know Haaland has that position. Marmoush is not going to start there. So the only way he's going to start is behind Haaland. And Pep has become known for his 4-1-4-1 formation, where he plays one single pivot, he plays 2 10s and then 2 men out wide in behind Haaland. Before that was De Bruyne and Bernardo Silva in those 10s, and those guys were creating, but Bernardo has fallen off, De Bruyne has fallen off. So now we see a Foden and a Marmoush, who we think next season will be starting in those positions. It will be a different style of play, and we're already seeing it as a different style of play now. There isn't a lot of creativity. There's not a lot of connection between the Manchester City players, which has been one of the reasons that their results haven't been as good this season.
Kind of Kevin De Bruyne has left a huge void in that team, left them disjointed, not to mention, of course, the injury to Rodri. And they don't seem to have a ready-made replacement for Kevin De Bruyne. I think we've seen Nico Gonzalez come in, and he's in the mold of a Rodri. But a creative midfield position, they don't have a ready-made replacement for Kevin De Bruyne. They have to find a new way forward, a new system. I think we start to see how Pep has adjusted with Marmoush running in behind the long balls, and as you said, attacking from the flanks, Doku and Savinho, focal point of the offense. Right. So we see the number 10 kind of drifting to the wings. If you look at Mo Salah, the way he plays, and you talk about how he creates for other players, he's essentially playing like a number 10, just in a different space on the field. Cole Palmer, he also plays on the wing. Also, you said Odegaard. They drift into positions where the space is, and you talked about how the defensive midfielder has emerged to stop that offensive attacking players. So they have to find spaces where they can operate. And that usually is playing a little bit wider. Well, we can look at the next two teams, Brighton, João Pedro. No, he's a hybrid as well, because he plays as a striker, but he's quite often charged with picking up the ball and creating. So he plays in that hole and does so effectively when he's fit. And for Villa, in Morgan Rodgers, he's a player that maybe not as creative in terms of his distribution, but certainly in terms of his ability to drive the team forward, pick up that ball in the middle of the park, take on players, dribble past them, and try to make something happen just with his sheer force.
Yeah, so the modern 10 is now a 9.5, and that's what I would call João Pedro. He's a classic 9.5. He's not quite a 9. Sometimes he plays in behind Danny Welbeck. Sometimes when Welbeck is injured, he's playing as a 9, but he is picking up the ball a little bit deeper. Players flood in front of him, give him options to pass, to cut it back, shoot. So he has the options to create in whatever way feels makes sense for the moment. But his role within the team, it's more about scoring than it is anything else. I would say he's a 9.5. So Morgan Rodgers for Villa, I think he's a unique development in the way that teams play. He might be the future of the number 10, a ball carrying number 10, a player who doesn't pass in between the lines. He dribbles in between the lines with power and pace and just desire to start to break teams down physically. Just the act of trying to track Morgan Rodgers wears down the other team, and it creates opportunities for other players on Aston Villa. Morgan Rodgers, I think, is a very unique player, and I wonder, is it replicable? Like, are there other teams who can put a player on the pitch who can do that or play that type of role where they don't need to pass, they just need to carry the ball and get into the box when the team is attacking and try to be in a position to finish if the ball comes.
He's a little bit similar to Jude Bellingham in a sense, right? Jude Bellingham would be another example of this type of player. Maybe they're not exactly the same, but similar characteristics.
Yeah, I agree. And it's interesting you bring up Jude Bellingham. It makes me want to think about England and the England lineup. Is it better to play Cole Palmer as a number 10 or Jude Bellingham as a number 10? I know I have a viewpoint on that, which is Jude, but other people I think would say Cole Palmer, and that's part of the debate. Like, where should football be going? Where should you, like, who should be running your team? What type of player should be running your team and how your team operates? I think in the modern game, and we'll use the Premier League, we're talking about the Premier League, a Morgan Gibbs-White versus a Morgan Rodgers, right? Morgan Gibbs-White would be more like your classic number 10. We talked about he plays defense because that's what Nuno wants him to do. But if he had his choice, he would just be passing the ball, right? Dribbling, trying to make things happen, not necessarily carrying the ball in between the lines, but passing in between the lines. Morgan Rodgers, on the other hand, I don't even know if I see him look up when he receives the ball to see if Watkins is, making a diagonal run and he can play it. He doesn't even look. He just goes with the ball, right? So it's a different mentality. And if you look at Unai Emery favors him over pretty much every other offensive player. I think he's started more games than any player in the offensive third for Aston Villa this season, and he's the go-to player. So
now they have Asensio, and I mean he's also number 10, goal scoring number 10. So they have a couple options there in that position that they've bolstered. They probably needed to give Morgan Rodgers a little bit of a breather because he's been playing literally every game. Right? If we look at the rest of the teams in the top 10, we have Newcastle, who I don't really see having an out-and-out number 10. The closest thing to that would be Guimaraes, but he's not. He's more of a central midfielder. He's box-to-box midfielder. Fulham, Emil Smith-Rowe would probably be the closest thing to that.
For Newcastle, this is a team that qualified, for the Champions League not too long ago, doing well in the hunt for the Champions League again. There's no number 10 in sight. There's no creative midfielder outside of Bruno Guimaraes, who does have a bit of creativity, but maybe that's the model that we're talking about, the true 4-3-3, where you have three powerhouse midfielders who can stop the attack, who can start the attack, get it to the wingers as quickly as possible, have a strong number 9 who can finish, who can do more than just finish, but carry the ball in Isak, and you have a totally different model. Is it good? Is it bad for the game? I don't know. I think that's arguable. I'm interested in seeing what the listeners have to say. So what do you think? Hit us up in the comments. Is the Is the number 10 position, is that something that's truly dying? If so, is that good for the game? Is it not so good for the game? Interesting discussion that we'd love to have with all of you.
I mean, we should just look at United and Tottenham,
Right,
not
right,
performing
right.
not performing well this season, but they're still big teams, and certainly have their say in how the game is shaping up. So if you look at Tottenham, I mean, they do have a number 10 in James Madison.
But he's in and out of the team.
Yeah, yeah,
Postacoglu
yeah. Well,
doesn't play him
yeah, yeah. I
regularly.
mean, but we Postecoglou. Postecoglou.
You
That's all I gotta say about that one, man. Anyway, but he's a classic number 10, right? I think they even
He is.
you could, yeah. And then if you look at your squad, United.
Yeah.
I mean, you have probably one of the best classic number 10s in modern football. Not being played necessarily as a modern 10, but somehow he's finding a way, even though that's not his charge on the team sheet. He still finds a way to be that creative chief and play as a number 10.
Well, just to touch on Bruno, I think Bruno doesn't know any other way to play other than as a 10. So with Ruben Amorim, he plays with a left and right 10 behind the striker, behind the number 9. And even in some games, Bruno is playing as one of the defensive midfield players. And somehow he finds a way to get forward. Somehow he finds a way to have one or two moments in the game that really define Manchester United's offensive output or at least chance creation if they don't score any goals. So yeah, alive and well in Bruno Fernandes. James Madison, for me, is a pure number 10. Postecoglou, for some reason, doesn't believe in him anymore, and he's moving to a different way of playing. Postecoglou, all-out attack. He's adjusted, and the way that he's adjusted is by removing his number 10. So that should tell you something about what managers feel they need to do in order to shore up their teams and make them more structurally sound from a defensive perspective, and perhaps maybe from an attacking perspective as well, at least in their opinions. Okay, well, that's a wrap. Thanks for joining us here on Premier Bros. We hope you enjoyed this conversation. Please join the conversation. Let us know what you think in the comments. We'll be back with more in the future.